So how do you feel this morning? 15早上好。Arnold 的展览。哎呦，我们的大师姐出来了。现在来到 Arnold's solo show。Wow. Yes. It's Arnold in front of his gigantic painting universe.这边是仿董其昌的山水册，这个是早年的作品之一。He's very proud. 我拍一下大家的反应。
Congratulate and celebrate Arnold Chang's creative years for over 40 artistic years, and he will take us through this display from the early time to the later times.
There's some strangers, but 99% of you I know. We're all friends. Let me just talk about a few of these things from, everybody likes the backstory, right? So let's start at the beginning. It's called a retrospective, but I did more than 8 paintings in my life. But it starts off from 1979, when I was 25 years old, and I had the wonderful opportunity of studying with C.C. Wong, who was introduced to me or I was introduced to him by James Cahill. So back in those days, I was studying at UC Berkeley with Judy Andrews hiding in the back, and some other people, but actually Judy and I both attended a class that C.C. Wong taught in San Francisco in painting and also in appreciation. She continued to have an illustrious career in art history, and I decided I'm going to New York to study with this guy. And I figured, a couple of years, maybe go back to Berkeley, get a PhD, whatever. Never graduated. So I stayed with CC for 25 years, and I had the amazing opportunity to learn from him by copying from the original works in his collection. And you all know he had one of the finest private collections of Chinese paintings outside of Asia, certainly. And this particular album by Dong Chang was one of his masterpieces. And I was able to copy from the original, right? So it was amazing. I'm in his house. He had a studio. He also had a house. He had apartments all over the place. I learned a little bit about real estate from him too, but that's another thing. So I had this opportunity. So I copied these literally from the pieces. No sketching, no just looking and copying. And through that process, I was able to absorb not only how Dong Chang painted in terms of concentrating on the brushwork and so forth, but also the way he developed compositions. And all of these are landscapes after various old masters. So by copying them as closely as I could, I was also able to gradually absorb how does Dong Chang reinterpret the old masters. So I'm sort of learning to see through Dong Chang's eyes looking back. And that helped me later when I did a work that's inspired by Jackson Pollock. But the original of this album is, I was happy and thrilled to be able to actually copy each leaf while it was still in his possession. And then it ended up in the Nelson Atkins Museum. That gentleman over there was responsible for taking it away from Cecil but offering it to the world. So I was happy that I got to copy it before it left his hands. And it's still one of the greatest Dong Chang albums. I think #1, right? It was shown in China recently in that big show. And actually, two of the best Dong Changs in that whole show were the album in Kansas City and the Hanging Scroll in Cleveland, right?
Right.
So that's great. So, here we are in Cleveland. I'm actually having a show, and a work has been acquired by this great museum. So, my scroll is going to live in the same house as Dong Chang and all these other great masters. It's just like mind-boggling. And I'm so thrilled that all of you are here to share with me. So that's the beginning. Now, 25 years old, if you look, fortunately they're small images. If you actually saw the real thing, that's not fair. Obviously they're not as good as Dong Chang, but they're pretty close copies, straight copies, nothing fancy, no cheating. And especially the color ones were really difficult. So I was, at 25, I'm a decent copyist. I got the brushwork, I sort of, captured composition. And then, since we're talking retrospective, we jumped to 2008. So the distance between being a decent copyist and being able to create something that's more or less original, even if it's traditional, it's a big distance, especially if you're not that gifted. But the good news is, with time and with persistence, it's a kind of art that it's not so much based on your technique. It's based on your ability to see and to appreciate what the masters were seeing. The drawing technique itself is surprisingly easy. It only takes about 20 years. But to actually get to the next level is difficult. So let's move on here. This is the centerpiece of the exhibition and centerpiece of a lot of things, because this work was acquired by the museum recently, and this was a painting some of you will know was in an exhibition at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in 2010-11, and it was called Fresh Ink, and they invited 10 artists to create new works that somehow were based on or resonated with something in the MFA's permanent collection. And I chose I was one of the artists chosen. I was the only one who was born outside of China. And so that was an honor already. And I figured, well, if I'm going to do something in the collection, I'm not, I think Hao Sheng was the curator. He assumed we were all going to like pick a stone painting or something and do a modern riff on it. But I said, well, I'm American, so I'm entitled to use Jackson Pollock as my starting point. But at the same time, I really didn't want to just do an inky Pollock. So my thought was that, I think Jackson Pollock he's not my favorite artist, by the way, but he's very interesting. And I thought he was influenced by Asian painting, Chinese painting, Japanese painting. And so I used to go to MoMA and look at the beautiful, big, great Jackson Pollock works and say, that's good, but if I could add some trees, that would be a really nice painting. So I thought, okay, I don't want to do anything Pollock. I want to do a painting that captures some of the spirit, some of the energy of a Pollock, but is really a Chinese painting. So I chose I went online and see what Jackson Pollocks are in the MFA, and they only have two. One's the earlier vertical work, and one was this horizontal piece. And I'm going, that's a handspring. So I got to go see it, and at that time there was this young curator named Joe Schreiber. I don't know what happened to him, but at the time he had some promise. It seems like he might have a chance of achieving something. But anyway, he was chosen to help me. He wrote, because they wrote about, there was a beautiful catalog. They wrote, several of the people wrote about different artists, and he somehow got suckered into writing about me. So we go back a long time. Before I actually did this painting, I did this one, which is, I called it, what did I call it? Brushwork study for reorienting Pollock. So the idea of this painting, unfortunately, it'd be nice if it was in a center cabinet because you can't see it. The idea of this is that you could turn it upside down and it still works as a landscape painting, to put it simply. So my thought was, okay, we've all seen films of Jackson Pollock, working and with splash. He doesn't really splash ink. He's using a stick and using gravity to make flow of the lines and painting in layers. And he walks around it. I went to his studio in Long Island, and you can still see on the floor it's covered with paint. And so as he's working, he's not necessarily hasn't determined, because he's walking around the whole thing, he hasn't determined the orientation that it's going to be viewed. So I thought, it's similar to Chinese painting because we work not necessarily on the ground, but we work flat, and we also work in layers. The difference is that with Pollock, he's working on canvas, and he's using opaque pigments that literally layer upon layer. Whereas when we work flat, with absorbent paper and ink, the layers blend together. So it's a whole different type of control, and yet there's still this sense of body, and maybe on a smaller scale. So he's doing big movements, rely on the gravity to let the paint hit the canvas, let it dry, put another layer. So when we do the layers, they kind of come together. So the idea here was to not necessarily have a particular orientation. You can look at it here, turn it upside down, it also works. And later on I expanded to do some that are omnidirectional. You can look at them from any angle. And actually this is not the painting, this is another Jackson Pollock. Here's a small illustration of the one in Boston. But in a way this is more, I could see this being more omnidirectional. you can look at it from different angles. But I was so lucky to be able to go up to Boston and see the Pollock with Joe. He took lots of photos while it was, on the table. They were working on it. We got to look at it. You could see the cigarette butts and the staples and stuff. And when we turned it over to see the bottom, actually we saw that there originally had been a different title. And it appeared that that painting was originally envisioned as a vertical. And then presumably he put another layer over it and determined it was horizontal. So that was kind of interesting. And so my work is only loosely based on Pollock, and I really didn't want people to think, oh, he's been doing all this traditional stuff, and suddenly discover Jackson Pollock, and boom, everything. No, I knew about Jackson Pollock before I knew about Dong Chi-Chang. But somehow it all came together and began to make sense. So I should also mention that this painting was acquired by a very astute collector who is over there named he said, Clarissa at one point, I believe, he said that if you ever acquire that hand scroll, that he and Elizabeth would generously donate this painting to the Cleveland Museum as well. So as I see on the label, it says promise gift. And so suddenly, I have two works here, and then actually there's a third one. Okay, so that's that. And then, so we jump from 1979 to 2008 when these two were done. And then we jump again to like the pandemic. So these are more recent. So what's great is this painting and that one were exhibited in Boston, and there's one the collaboration with Michael Cherney was recently exhibited in Chomung's gallery. But other than that, none of these have been seen. Except for the Pollock. So it's kind of fun. So these three were relatively recent. I think all during the pandemic when initially I was thrilled because nobody bothered me and I could just work. After a year, it's like I need to show these to somebody. I need some feedback. But I think they make a nice trio, and just talking, just off the top of my head, I mean, this one is interesting because, for one thing, the paper is toned. It's a paper that I purchased in Taiwan years and years ago, and it's kind of greenish. So when you put color on it, it changes. You have to adjust because of the tone of the paper. I like this painting because it's sort of not one style. It's sort of different styles that kind of combine. So the right half, the center, and the left portion could be three different paintings in a way. And somehow challenging myself to pull it together so that it works in a nutshell. So when I paint, almost always I don't start with an image in mind. I just start scribbling, and I let the brush lead me wherever it wants to go. And so each different kind of paper, each different color of the paper, and each particular brush leads me in a different way. And this one, I think, is a good example of that. If you look at it closely, I really, and I don't necessarily even have an orientation. So I just literally start drawing lines and just let it go. And this one in particular, if you look at it up close, there's really not a lot of detail there. They're just lines and figure, just patterns and textures. And so what I'm trying to do is just play with the brushwork that imitates textural patterns that we find in nature. And then gradually build it up to a point where it's readable, legible as a landscape, but doesn't, not landscape like Hudson River School, which is a picture of some place. These are just what we call line landscapes, where it's based more on my knowledge of painting than it is observation of specific places. That's another thing. Here you see a tiny picture of the Fen Kwan in the Taiwan Google, which is one of the great northern stone paintings in Chinese history. The problem with being a more traditionalist painter is that everybody writes when they write about you, they always put up like a Fen Kwan or a Wang Meng, or you're always competing. It's like if you were a thinker of the Western oil painting guitar. Doing figures, everything has to be compared to the Mona Lisa. It's sort of not. But anyway, the point is that even though it's totally haphazard, the lines are going in all different directions, somehow it holds together almost like if it could be a monumental landscape. Now, this painting I'm particularly happy with because, as I said, it was during the pandemic. And I think it captures a little bit of the spirit of loneliness. It was, I think you could say it's unfinished, but it's consciously left in an unfinished way because given the way that I paint, and I also remind people that with this kind of painting, it's not like oil. You can't gesso over the canvas if you make a mistake. You can't change the color. It's not like pencil or charcoal where you can erase. We're using absorbent paper and a brush with wet ink. The wetness and dryness of the ink you have to calibrate before you actually apply it to the paper. So that means you have to anything that's going to be negative space you have to leave blank. So there's no white pigment and so forth. So because I'm painting in this way, there's always a point where I'm just like drawing lines and trying to find the forms. There's always a point, and that's always a challenge to make it look like a landscape. And when I say look like a landscape, it's just like I have a database full of hundreds and hundreds of paintings that I've seen over the years, and you sort of learn. Rather than just constructing it in the traditional way, you learn to find that image somehow in this mess of lines. So this one, I got to the point where, okay, I see it. Like these things that look like waterfalls, it's just leaving the paper blank and just kind of finding your way, how do these peaks connect and so forth. And that's true of all of them. But on this one, I left it. I got to the point where I go, okay, I've got it. I could now finish this off. I could, there's several directions I could go to make it more solid. And I said, no, I'll just leave it. You guys can figure it out in your head which way you're going to go. Because once I've made the decision, then you can't go back. As opposed to this one where, I worked on it step by step. It was more challenging to find a form that will work across these different styles and different colors, right? So each one's different, but this one I really felt good about. And it somehow also captured that moment during the pandemic when you didn't know what was going to happen, right? And you can only hope that you can figure it out. And so I just left it like that. And then I later realized, there's no trees, there's nothing, there's just lines. So that was good. And then this one followed shortly after, which is a little bit more detailed,
intentional,
and more readable as a landscape and more thought out. Okay, so from there, so this is all like, what year is this?
2020.
2020 already.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these are all like 2020. And then Over here, two kind of different directions that I've been going in recently. 2023. Okay, this is also 2020. So some of you are maybe familiar with the collaborations that I do with Michael Cherney. If not, I'll say Michael Cherney is American, but he's lived in China for 30 years, and he's a photographer. And what he does essentially is travels all over China, takes photos of the mountain landscapes and so forth, and then he, rather than enlarge the big photo, he actually shoots it on 35 millimeter slides, black and white slides, which almost nobody has. And there's apparently only one, he told me there's only one place that still processes black and white 35 millimeter slides in Colorado. So he's in China, traveling all over China looking for a scenic spot. He takes the photo, puts it in his camera, and then has to eventually get it back to Colorado to get developed. Then he gets the slide back, and then he uses a loop on a light box. He finds little strips, little slivers, little strips that he then decides he will blow up and print on shred paper so that they look like ink paintings. So the reason he uses film is that he likes the grain rather than if you do digital, it pixelates at a certain point. So he can take little images and blow them up, and then he has a big Epson printer and he prints onto paper. So he does his thing, he does different versions of that, and then some of them he reserved for me. Well, he'll print an image on a sheet of paper, and then I paint around it. So on this one, you can't see from there, but this is one of my favorite of these collaborations, and I was thrilled when Clarissa saw it in the gallery and decided to purchase it for the museum. This one is really cool because if you look at it closely, that rectangle there is the photo. So it's from a real place, but blown up and then printed like that. And so I like this one because the image itself, he has this slanted plane here, and this slanted path or water, I don't even know what it is, going this way. So it looks, you don't realize that that's a rectangle. So when I painted it, rather than showing the rectangle, I tried to make it look like that's the photo. And anyway, it's just fun because the whole point of these is to challenge our assumptions about what is a photo, what is a painting. Also, it reminds me as a painter who uses traditional techniques that what we call chunfa, the texture strokes, come out of the old masters looking at different kinds of surfaces and developing brush methods that imitate that. So he's doing the opposite. He's familiar with Chinese painting. He goes, you know, if I blow that up, you'll see, oh yeah, that looks like Pima Chun or whatever. And so then I actually go back and use traditional techniques to create a composition. That's fun. And then more recently, I've been playing more with color. I can't really explain what I'm doing. Joy does a much better job, but you can ask her later. But it has to do something with the fact that, for me, Chinese painting, especially Werner and Wang, is about line. And the Chinese have really developed an understanding of brushwork over the centuries. And really explored line. Also, obviously, because they have a connection with calligraphy, they've explored the idea of line and the technique of making lines on a very deep level, and combined with ink tone. Whereas I think a lot of Western art, of course, these are both broad generalizations, but a lot of Western art is based on color. And I think the Chinese, for the most part, Chinese landscapists, unless they're doing like blue and green style, for the literati type paintings, even Dongji Chang, it's like the color is added after the drawing is the ink drawing is completed, and very often it's sure they're great colorists, Wang Yuanqi, Shi Tao, great colorists, but for the most part they do the actual drawing in ink and then color, so it's more topical. Leaves are green or red depending on the season. They use sort of warm, cool color scheme. Less of a intensive study of color as in the West. So blah blah blah. I haven't done that study either. But I grew up in New York, looking at Western art. So color to me, I have a kind of more natural sense. And I learned about traditional Biguo from Cixi Wang. So somehow what I'm getting at is that, we're not talking about painting landscapes like a given place, but we're doing paintings that use landscape as an excuse to do abstract art. So there's sort of vibrations that you get through the brushwork in Chinese painting, where it's just the line itself has a character, has a texture, has a feeling, and in a good painting it just sort of vibrates. Whereas in Western art, I think a lot of times they get the vibration from the way they place color next to each other and things like that. So theoretically, I would love to be able to combine the two somehow. And I don't know if that's possible, but this is a direction that I think is getting closer. Okay. All right, finally, this little painting took me more than 10 years to do, which doesn't mean that I sat there every day working on it, although I did the entire painting with the same brushes I use on all the other paintings, a little, 2-3 inch brush, even though it's big. And so I have to say honestly, where it is right now, in 2018 was the Cleveland show, I think, 2018.
The last time?
When I did the collaboration.
2018, it's here. It's
2016. Okay, so when at that time it was was the curator. She decided she would give a show to me and Michael Cherney. Some of our individual works, some of the collaborations, and then in the same space. And I envisioned my big painting, which I had already started, would go here, but I couldn't finish it in time. So this work I actually started like in 2013, something like that, and it's one sheet of paper that my friend from Shanghai had brought over in the 80s. He brought me 2 big sheets of paper like this, which at the time was already old paper. So I don't know how old the paper is. It's rather thick, shringer, but with tooth, with some texture. So it's really nice paper. But I didn't dare use it. So I probably had the paper for like 20 years before I even touched it. So there were 2 sheets I mentioned, and it just so happens that I took one sheet and I divided it vertically like that and made 3 hand scrolls, one of which is this one. So it's exactly the same paper. And then the other sheet, sorry. The other sheet I kept, again, for years and years and years. And to paint this picture, actually, I was hoping to get it done in time for the Cleveland show. So I actually rented a studio for like 2 years where I thought I was going to get it done. And I didn't finish. So even though I say it took more than 10 years, it's like I would do it in spurts. And the problem is because the paper's so big, there's no way I could hang it and work on it. So of course I'm working flat, but even so, if you imagine, if this is on the table, it's very hard to get to the middle, and you have to keep rolling it back and forth to cover the whole thing. So it's hard to envision what it's going to look like. And plus, in my studio, my final studio, which has a wall, the only wall big enough is horizontal. So if I did tack it up, which was a pain to begin with, it would be horizontal. But I had always thought that this was the place for this painting. So I tried to do a painting that's can be looked at either vertically or horizontally, and figure out who was going to show it first, and then based on their space, that's how it ended. And fortunately, it ended up here. And I have to say, Isha's not here, but Isha and her crew, the conservators, mounted it here. And they did a fabulous job and were able to install it. It's almost like custom fit for this case. Now, in terms of the painting itself, I've called it Mapping the Universe. Is that what you call it? Mapping the Universe. You chose two, because I like the word two as a painting or as a map. So I wanted to do something large, obviously, to fill it, but I didn't want it to look heavy. So I wanted to, a lot of big paintings are like, heavy ink and broad brushes. It's like intimidating. I wanted it to be uplifting. And I worked on it little by little by little over the years, adding different, if you look at it closely, there's sort of different sections that kind of flow together, and that's the feeling that I wanted. And I never had a chance to see this vertical until yesterday. And I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And what else was I going to say? So at the time, the most recent time, not most recent, but a couple of years back, I was watching Game of Thrones, which, why not? I can't follow those shows. I never know what's going on. But I like the idea that there's all these kingdoms. So as I'm doing this, I'm going, okay, so there's a kingdom here, and there's a kingdom here, and they sort of come together, and sometimes they fight, but in the end, it all works out. So that's that painting, and I think that's a good one for me to end with. So I think we painted it in 2024. So we go from 1979 to 2024. That's my life, and most of you were, involved in my life at various times, and I greatly appreciate all of you for coming.
Just a few comments. I'm of course glad Arnold waited with this painting until I became curator and I could show it. This is really stretched on this piece of paper is stretched on one frame. It's not on a Tycor plate. It's really on one frame. And we haven't told Arnold, but this is by 2 millimeters. We couldn't have fitted. And we will never take it out of the case again. So it always stays a secret. This is of course a joke. But also, Arnold, you had what's really interesting, the two signatures, how in the process of making it, you find here two signatures in two different directions. The first one was, of course, the horizontal way of doing it. So you have this horizontal Zhang Hong here, and then a little bit lower, when we were talking about having it in here, the Zhang Hong, moved into the other direction. So we have two signatures in two different
directions. So I'm hedging my bet depending on where it ends up. If you have a big living room and you only have a horizontal space, it's okay.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful. Arnold, can you say anything about the silver?
There's some silver on it.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, our
I just want
visitors
a little,
are fascinated
I want a
by
little, you know, the universes.
exactly.
But that was something that Isha, the conservator, made sure that I would use not varnish, but to fix it on there so that the silver doesn't flake off. And then she also did it again when it came here. But it's amazing. It's amazing. They had to mount this on the floor. And there's some great photos. They have a bridge thing that you can.
And yeah.
How do you see how?
They had also 12 people. We had the full team of art handlers here when they moved it into because we can only open the case up to this. So you cannot completely open it. So it had to be by millimeter lifted into the case. And Isha said to the art handlers, the frame cannot in no way bend because that stretches the paper to an extent it could potentially crack. So they had to be lifted very, very slowly, keep it straight and even, the surface all the time. And it was just, we all held our breath.
Unfortunately, I wasn't here.
Yeah.
So even before, so they had to back it on the floor and then paste it onto the wall outside the conservation studio, and then they put a cover in front. It's an amazing process. Yeah. So even then, I came and it was drying on the drawing board, drying the wall, and I look at it, still hard on.
Yeah, the drawing board was in the corridor. This, we had to shift it outside the conservation studio. I also wanted to point out on this label here, Arnold, it took you 9 hours and 11 hours here to talk about this.
Yeah, so when Joe's boss, when he used to have a boss, asked me to participate in this first ink show, I thought, well, that's really cool. So I decided to do this. These proportions are roughly the same as the Pollock that MFA has. And I said, okay, this is a special thing. People always ask, how long did it take you to paint this painting? Regardless of which painting. That's like number one question. So I said, okay. And my answer is, it depends what you mean. Do you mean over how long a period, like 10 years? Or do you mean the brush touching the paper? So I said, in those days I had like state-of-the-art small camcorder, right, in 2008, and with the mini discs. So I decided I'd set that up on a tripod, and every time I started to paint, I would click it on, and when I stopped, I would turn it off. And so, working on this painting, I ended up with 11 one-hour takes over a 3 or 4 month period, which I kept. Joe, you're the only one who saw them. I showed them to you at some point and then totally forgot about it.
She digitized.
Totally forgot. So recently, after this acquisition was happening, I said, see if those tapes are. I had them digitized, and so there's 11 hours of me painting this painting, which nobody wants to watch. But after it was digitized, then Q, who's the gallery director at Chomons, she knows how to do this. She speeded it up, so it's like I think a half hour. You can see the whole process in a half hour, and I gave that to the museum for their archives. But obviously nobody's going to want to watch that either. But I thought for the exhibition it would be cool to take a section of that. And so what we have here, we have a QR code, and you can take your phone and scan the QR code, and it will link you to I think like a 4-minute version of me doing this, which is fun. So you can actually have it on your phone and try to see where we're going in the process.
And we will put the half-hour version also onto the website. We will link it to the
And it's also on the website, right?
It's linked onto the painting. When you go onto the collection database, find this painting, you will find the 3-minute one, and we will put the half-an-hour one, link it to this as well. And what I actually learned was so fascinating to see that Arnold was working on all ends and areas of the painting at the same time. You really see that this brushwork is done layer by layer by layer. It's not composing something with background, foreground. It's really going back and forth over the paper all the time.
Oh, and also, I just thought of this grotto. I'm sort of picking up on the idea of being able to look at it from either side. Right, so I decided, there is this kind of thing in Chinese painting. These were probably painted from that side. So I thought it's got a little touch of that. And I'm just realizing today, we are calling this secluded valley in the Cold Mountains, Hanshan Yougu, because that was the title slip that Xu Yunshu, who's a great calligrapher, seal carver, that's what it's there, it's not on video, that he wrote. So he came up with the title. And then I'm thinking, actually, it's not a valley. It's a grotto, right? It's a Yaodong. But that doesn't sound as good. So anyway, that's the title, but it's more like the Shenzhou, Zhanggongdong, or there's the Shitao and the Met, what's that one called? Zhanggongdong. This could be Zhanggongdong. I'm Zhanggongdong. So if you'd like to change it, it's okay. I'll have to get Xu Yunshu to rewrite it.
Yeah, 真的张公洞。
Questions? I can't hear, but if somebody... It's great not being able to hear, because I could just... Well, that's all I know.
So next is...
Oh, good. Now we can look at some drawings.
Perfect.